15% of millennials still lived with their parents, and at that time, the youngest millennial was already 26 years old. Let's say that you are a 32-year-old millennial who's moved back home with your parents. Over the past year, you've sent out 500 job
That's
applications.
rough.
You started with positions in your field, and then you tried one somewhat related, and now you're just sending applications to anything that pays. And the worst part? You are a month away from seriously considering an only
I know so many people that are having problems with the job, sending out tons of applications, can't find anything. They use AI sometimes to send out hundreds a day. I don't really know how they get away with it. I don't know how generic that looks, but I also know they have AI that's going through your applications, filtering it out for that company you're trying to work for, and they'll just dismiss it without even looking at it with a real person.
fans account. Your father doesn't understand why you can't just go introduce yourself to someone at the company. Say you're looking for work. 62% of his generation agrees with that tactic compared to only 40% of millennials. Boomers stayed at the same job an average of 10 to 15 years. Millennials, well, they're lucky to get 3 to 5 years at any one company. Living
Wow, that's a
together
lot of
also
job
means
hopping.
bringing two very different psychologies under the same roof, especially when it comes to their actual psychological state. Millennials are much more open about their emotions, their struggles, and are not against seeking help. In 2021, a survey of 2,000 Americans, 45% of millennials said that they're willing to seek therapy. Baby boomers, that number barely reached 8%. And that was in a survey taken in the middle of a pandemic, when you would assume that people might need help. Perhaps this co-living.
Oh man, I really got something to say about that. In my opinion, how much I've been seeing people, boomers need therapy more than anybody because they don't even know anything about themselves or people and very little about how the world actually works. They're so ingrained with their narrative that's out of touch with reality. They're a lot of them are delusional and they're very selfish, very selfish. They cannot let go of anything for the next generation, even if it leaves like the detriment towards their kids and their community. They do not care.
Arrangement is part of what has created such friction between the millennials and baby boomers. It's not just a media narrative. Associate Professor Felix Danbold of the UCL School of Management found that these two generations express a lot more animosity toward each other than anyone
Oh
else.
yeah,
But
big
while
time.
boomers worry that millennials' values will upend their way of life, millennials are worried about something much more practical. They see the older generations refusing to leave their jobs or sell their homes, and it's blocking millennials from building their own future. The result is real tangible damage to their careers, finances, and opportunities. The difference in
There we
viewpoint
go.
might explain why millennials are so open to addressing their issues. They were raised with a boomer tough it out mentality that didn't really help anyone in their family. So today they try to actually work on their mental health. And they're gonna need a lot of work because the era millennials were raised in did some serious damage to their psychology. Imagine it's 2003, you're a
Pretty big.
millennial just starting high school. Your body is changing and you're feeling a little self conscious about it. Pretty normal teenage stuff. But in the 2000s, when most millennials were just teens, something went wrong. Media, society, and even their own families didn't just notice their struggles, they amplified them and made them 1,000 times worse. In the early 2000s, the heroin chic look of the 1990s
Oh my
had fully
god. This is when you're not comparing yourself to your small pool of communities, your school and family. Now you can compare it to the world and their expectations of what you should be striving for. And a lot of that's just marketing to buy my product.
taken hold in popular culture. In magazines and TV shows, most women had basically become skin and bones. The consequences were real. Rates of eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia skyrocketed. According to a study by Zhao and Encinosa, between 1999 and 2000 and 2005 and 2006, eating disorder hospitalization exploded. This was especially noticeable among millennials, then in their preteen, teen, and early 20s. Hospitalizations increased 18% for people.
Seriously, how many people out there know somebody that's gone through this? Because I know a few. That's not uncommon.
Aged 12 to 19, 19% for people 19 to 30, and 119% for those under 12. An entire
That is
generation was
insane.
under attack. Millennials grew up with some of the most distorted body images of all time, and that hasn't changed for many of them. In a 2020 survey tracking body confidence, the least confident group of women were millennials. Women aged 25 to 34 rated their body confidence 37 out of 100. That is barely half of a failing grade. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the psyche of a generation that
Hmm.
once thought avocado toast was an investment, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It makes our writers feel slightly more like adults, too. If constantly fighting your body to stay skinny wasn't exhausting enough, millennials would get their first taste of another mindset that would haunt them for life: hustle culture, otherwise known as the road to burnout. You're a millennial in 2006, you're just
Yeah.
about to graduate high school, your parents, your guidance counselors, the entire world is telling you college is not only important, but necessary. You might even be the first generation in your family to get a university degree. You start applying to the best schools you could get into, and then it happens. You get accepted to your dream school, and then you see the tuition. Your jaw drops. Maybe you can pick up some extra work to cover it. Maybe not.
When I was going to college, I thought 10 grand was a lot, and that was basically for like a semester. So $40,000, pretty common. I knew some people that went to college, started a path, whatever they went for. They'd get like halfway in, sometimes about like 80, 90% done. For whatever reason, they're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And they would switch and start over. When I was in college, I met people that came from universities. I went to a community school, and they were starting their new education with $40,000 of debt already. To me, that was like game over. Like, there's no way you can come back from that. Now I know that's nothing. People racking up way more. $100,000. I've seen staying in school for 6, 8 years to make around 70 to 100,000, but they don't think about that interest. So maybe when they're 50, 60, they can pay it off if they're lucky. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's bad.
Not so fast. One study found that from 1988 to 2018, tuition at private colleges increased by 129% on average. The more affordable public school options, those skyrocketed by a massive 213%. In the past, people could use the salary from a summer and/or part-time job to pay off their tuition costs. That wasn't
That must
really
have
the
been
case for most
nice.
millennials by the time they got to college. Guess it's time for a loan that will in no way, shape, or form affect your future. After all, that degree is going to get you a job making some serious money, right? Right? Not for most
Nope.
millennials. One study found that by the age of 35, 17% of baby boomers had followed a path through college to a prestigious and well paying professional career like law or
17%.
medicine. At age 35, only 7.3% of millennials had done the same. That is less than half. So, why aren't millennials making their way into high paying careers, worsening their psychological load? Well, because the system has made it almost impossible for them to do so, creating the awful hustle culture that quickly became psychological burnout for most. And why are the millennials burning out? They entered the job market during one of the
Yo, what's
worst
the
recessions
point?
in recent memory. Jobs on the ground were scarce, entry level wages were relatively low, and people were grateful for anything they could get. Kellogg School of Management professor of strategy Nicola Bianchi studied the conditions that produced the millennial grind mindset. His work gives us an idea of just how hopeless the job market was for millennials. If you were entering the job
Bad.
market in 2010, good luck to you. The global economy fell into a hole. Unemployment among your generation is around 12 to 19%, according to the Pew Research Center. Even though you have a bachelor's degree in economics, you are paying thousands in loans every month, and all you can get is a job in retail. It pays the bills, sort of. After a
Crap.
couple of years, a position at a company that's actually related to your field
You're
opens
just to
up, and
pay
then
bills.
boom, you
Forget
get the
about
job. Just
investing
grind
and
for
any
a
kind
few
of
years,
lean
and
in
you can start
advance.
moving up the ladder. But soon you'll notice that you're not moving anywhere at all, and neither are most of the people around you. Why? The recession and its after effects created a climate in which the boomer generation became more hesitant to retire from their senior positions. Moving up the ladder became more difficult than ever. The result was a mix of hopelessness and endless grinding. It is the defining struggle of the millennial generation. It also makes millennials more likely to change companies and careers. They're less optimistic about the
Heading into that, boomers have some of the worst financial spending I've ever seen, and they just expect the system, the government, to just come in and give them more money somehow. Like they're not going to just leave them hanging because they've relied on the system their whole lives that's benefited them, but it's gradually deteriorated. So needing to keep these jobs is something that they created their own problem for, and now everyone has to pay the price because of it.
Perks of company loyalty and corporate America in general, but they do work much longer and harder to try to make ends meet, and they make a better case for their own path forward. So, contrary to popular belief, millennials aren't lazy and blowing all their money. They are overworked and poorer than other generations. Worker productivity has increased rapidly from the time of the boomers in the workforce to today. Between 1979 and 2021, average U.S. worker productivity increased 64.6%,
That's
but
insane.
wages only went up 17.3%.
Getting
Oh,
ripped
and
off.
your 64-year-old coworker at the office is being paid way more than you. In fact, more than you'll probably ever make anytime soon. Between 1979 and 2018, the wage gap between workers over 55 and those under 35 increased by 61%. That's not just a U.S. phenomenon either. Bianchi's study found that after Italy raised its retirement age to 67 in 2011, things got worse for younger workers. Suddenly, all the rewards were going to senior workers. Everyone else struggled just to get by. From
Oh
1985 to
man, what are we
2019, the
doing?
mean worker age in
Hey, what's
Italy
going on?
increased by 19%. Over the same period, anyone over 55 also started making bank. 56-year-olds saw a 33% increase in wages, while 65-year-olds saw a 53% increase in wages. But
Holy,
those
that's a
under
lot.
35, their wages only went up by 14%. The difference in mean wages between older and younger workers almost doubled, increasing by 96%. No
Jesus.
wonder millennials are ending up completely burned out and much sadder than their boomer coworkers. Multiple studies have
Could
found
blame
that
them.
they are the most burned out generation of all. One study found that 66% of millennials report moderate to high burnout compared to 39% of baby boomers. It gets worse. Another survey of 1,000 U.S. employees found that 77% of millennials have experienced burnout symptoms compared to only 38% of boomers. That wage gap, coupled with no room for growth, is really doing a number on their mental
So it's
state,
like, what are they
which
supposed to
obviously
do?
is another survey question, which found that only 47% of millennials rated their personal well being as above average. 84% of boomers did the same. We would all be thrilled if our house values had quintupled, while we also got the highest raises by far right before retiring.
Everyone
It's
keeps
like, are
asking me
we
how I
waiting
do
for the
my
boomers to
podcast
die? Is
alone.
that when
The
we finally get our
answer
turn?
Riverside.
That's what it's sounding like.
I get high quality.
Scientists aren't just guessing that finances are the main cause of millennial burnout and stress either. The APA's 2023
Yo, what's
Stress
up?
in
Oh, how
America
you doing,
survey
man?
found
How you
that
doing, Eagle?
millennials are drowning in
You doing
financial
good?
stress. 67% of 18 to 34-year-olds and 63% of 35 to
Yo, take a
44-year-olds
listen to this
feel
stuff. This is
completely consumed by
crazy.
money worries. Boomers, well, just 13%. Money is crushing millennials. And while they've gotten some pretty weak raises, it doesn't translate to a better quality of life. Oxfam found out that workers aged 25 to 34 are earning about $4,200 less than they would have 30 years ago. It's partly a
That's
result of
so much. That's
increasing
a
inequality
month's worth
across the
of
board
pay.
in
Real
wealthy
good pay.
countries, something that has been happening for a while now, and general corporate stagnation. Millennials are better educated than previous generations while being underpaid, overstressed, and in way more debt. And they need way more money just to get
Money
by, since their
inflation,
share of the
work
nation's wealth
inflation.
is vastly lower than the boomers at the same age. Progress? Forget it. But the Federal Reserve has
This
another
is
theory
doomer
on why
stuff.
millennials are spending less. They have less money. Millennials are not even getting the perks that were almost guaranteed just a few years ago. From 2000 to 2021, the number of college grads who got employee-provided healthcare as a perk dropped by 22%. It created a much more insecure generation, one that hesitates to pursue major
Oh
life goals like
no,
starting a
man. Yeah,
family.
and it's so
Millennials
real.
are also part of the
No
sandwich
one's having
generation.
families
That means that many are
compared to
caring
how it used to
for
be.
both young kids and aging parents. And that adds even more stress. Part of this reason they are a sandwich generation is because they're waiting until they're older to have kids, to be able to afford to have kids. This is thanks to the very high cost of living in most of the West. It takes people longer to become financially stable these days. And by longer, we mean potentially their entire lives. Between 1980 and 2023, the median age for marriage for women has increased by 29%, from 22 to 28.4. The median age for the first birth for women went up by 23%, from 22.6 to 27.9. Only 13% of millennials opted for early marriage and parenthood. 27% of baby boomers did the same. While this isn't necessarily a
That's so bad. 13%. I saw this thing. It was like the population. Usually, you want a pyramid like this, where the oldest is at the top, and you have the youngest at the bottom to support the top, because usually the top is the most expensive. But in our society, we have it like this, right? The reverse. And you can't support that. So when you have the older generation taking all the benefits from the younger generation, that means there's going to be nothing for these younger generations to start their own. So there's no one to support them when they get old, especially when they don't want to even have kids. So it's just a societal collapse, domino effect. And there's not a lot you can do to fix that. Maybe immigration, but we've seen that's doing a lot of hard management issues, let's just say.
bad thing for some millennials, waiting for marriage and kids isn't a choice, but a financial necessity. Let's say you're a millennial woman, 32 years old, looking to have a child. You know that you'll have to go back to work pretty soon after giving birth, as your office doesn't offer much maternity leave, and it's not like you can easily hop into another job in this economy. So you try to figure out the cost of childcare and you start calling daycare centers in your area. You come up with an average based on all the quotes you've heard, 2,000.
Why? Why is it that much? $2,500. Let me do the math real quick. I want to see how much this is full time. All right, so 2,500 divided by 160, because that's 40 hours a week. $15 an hour. $15.6 an hour. Is that really worth it? If you work any kind of low wage, I don't think so. I would argue this is why you wouldn't even want your one of the parents to even go to work. Just take care of the kid at home.
$500 a month. The cost of childcare has increased 220% since 1990, and it's not even completely
220%.
reliable. The 2023 Kids Count report found that more than half of working parents have had to get to work late or leave early in the last 3 months because of issues with childcare. Even worse, 23% of those parents report being fired for those issues. You look
Dude,
back over the budget sheets realizing not only can you not afford childcare, you
situation.
might end up losing your job because of it. That's not even taking into account all of the new clothes, cribs, bottles, and diapers you'll have to purchase. Baby Center found that the first year of baby-related costs comes out to around $20,400 for parents. That doesn't include giving birth or daycare for the most part. The costs of raising
daycare, 20,000 without even including daycare. Well, right off the rip, and if you're living in an apartment that's around $1,300, that's like your cap, and you're a single parent, you can't afford this. Unless you're making $95,000, you can't afford this. After taxes, after all your bills, your car breaks because it will break. You can't. You have no money left. Even with that tax return, it's like $6,000, $36,000. You'd have to be on child support somewhere. But
a baby can eat up to 22% of household income. Care.com found that the average parent can give up to 29% of their savings for childcare costs. To put that into perspective, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recommends families should be spending no more than 7% of their household income on childcare. Because of those extreme costs, half of moms have changed their family plans. A quarter of potential moms have decided to have fewer children. Extreme costs have influenced every aspect of millennial thinking, even one as personal as giving birth. But while a big chunk of the millennials are struggling to get by, another segment is doing better than ever. And that's because inequality has rapidly increased over the years, with the Gini index rising by 25% between 1968 and 2022. That has created a huge gap in welfare within the millennial generation. For example, low skilled service workers in the baby boomer generation could still look forward to a decent life. 63% of them owned their own homes at the age of 35. In that same group among millennials, only 42% owned their homes. The poorest millennials, around 14% in total, actually have negative net worth compared to only 8.7% of boomers. This huge inequality gap creates fractured communities and resentment, which often translates to crime
Can't
and
blame them.
violence. Coupled with stricter policing, this has led to a massive increase in incarceration rates among millennials compared to previous generations at the same age, even though the crime rate in the US has gone down. What does it all mean? Millennials have lost their faith. In 2014, the Pew Research Center found that only 50% of millennials said they definitely believed in God. 64% of Gen X and 70% of baby boomers said the same. In fact, 35% of millennials aren't affiliated with any organized religion at all. The scandals that came to light in the Catholic Church probably didn't help in that regard. All of this has set some millennials back and fueled depression for others, but many, being fiercely independent, are just forging their own paths. Psychologists call it milestone agnosticism. Many millennials don't believe that there's a certain age by which they should have gotten married, started a business, or finished education. People are getting married in their 40s, they're going back to school in their 30s, or completely changing career paths at multiple points throughout their lives.
Gotta
And
adapt.
this doesn't scare them as much as it might scare other generations. That might be because millennials came of age during terrorist attacks, international recessions, and one of the worst job markets in recent history. So there is nothing
Good
this world could throw
times
at them that they
create
haven't seen some form of. But it
creates
also
hard
could be
times.
because, according to the same Solston data, millennials also scored the highest of any generation on the trait labeled as actions. Solston uses that to assess a person's openness to new experiences, which will serve millennials well when they have to deal with the future novel reality of never being able to retire. The silver lining is that, according to a 2015 study by American University, speaking about mental health issues has been normalized in the millennial generation. Since they grew up hearing about anxiety, depression, and eating disorders, they're much more willing to talk about their problems to their friends or with a therapist. And let's face it,
Yeah,
that's something they'll need. If you want to see how millennials fit into the
that was
bigger picture
cool.
and how every generation got shaped
Yeah,
differently,
that was
check
pretty
out Every
cool.
Generation Explained in 10 minutes.
Worst generation. Oh man, I've seen a lot with this because they raised the most spoiled generation. But these guys didn't really parent. These guys were spoiled, didn't do anything with these groups, and these groups got messed up, which created this group. And then this one is like the Hail Mary, hopefully everything is fixed, basically. Yeah. The comment says, as a 40 millennial, I did everything I was told. Study hard, go to school, get a job, and go back to my terminal degree. Grad school broke and bankrupt me now with over 300,000 in student loan debt. I cry often, feeling stuck, knowing I'll never be able to pay this off. Living check to check with a doctorate degree is embarrassing and disappointing. We're definitely scammed. And they wonder why we don't want kids. Yeah. My grandfather dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, found a job, started a family, and bought a house. I have a college degree, single, can't afford rent. We're cooked. What's crazy is before COVID, I could, with my pay, I could like afford a house and family and all that. And then I saw the housing market double and triple on top of everything else with the same pay. Rent is it? Renting, getting a house? That's called, especially taking care of someone. Because I would want the stay at home personally as an option. But yeah, things change fast. What else we got? American Dream died in 2009. We never fully recovered from the recession, the bank bailout, loans. We got F. Yeah. It isn't just money. Our food is crap. All the vehicles, electronics. We need our crap. Our clothing is crap. And the housing market is garbage. Yeah, it's a lot of doomer mentality. I'm a millennial. I've changed jobs every 1 or 2 years since getting out of high school and started at $7.62 an hour. Hey, that's more than what I started at. Now I'm making $46 an hour. Wow. I nearly doubled my income in the last 2 years alone. Never seen a company loyalty play out for anybody. A company has never been loyal to me. There's no incentive for me to be loyal to them. I see that a lot too. I definitely see that a lot.